All right, so next slide. So we're going to talk about making and fostering relationships. I'm Judy Miller. I'm a clinical psychologist about this. So we'll talk about a few different things. So I wanted to first start with there's a wide range of relationships, and we are all in relationships with different people all the time. So here's just a brief list of some of the kinds of relationships we have throughout our lifetime. Next slide. And we also need to keep in mind that people have different levels of social energy. So some people are introverted and really, they need time for their social batteries to recharge. Some people are very extroverted and they actually get energy from being around other people. And autism spans the range. So there are a lot of people with autism who are very extroverted, love to meet people, love to ask questions. And then there are some who really are very introverted and really like to spend a lot of time by themselves. Neither of those is unique to autism. That's just a human thing, but autism is not one or the other. We see the whole range. You also might differ from your child in that some people get a lot of anxiety around social situations and really overthink things. A lot of kids with autism are, they might be confident in lots of ways, but then when it comes to social situations, they don't like to have the attention. They don't like to have the spotlight on them. They get really uncomfortable. And then there are other people with autism and without who are overly friendly, and they don't seem to recognize that maybe in some situations, the right thing to do is actually be a little cautious or not really extend yourself in an overly friendly way. So we can see all of us range on this also. And you may differ in this even in your family members. Some people really thrive by having a few close friends, and others really want to have a large social circle. And that's not unique to autism either. And then sometimes kids with autism really want to interact with other people outside of school. But sometimes they use school as their social time, and after school is really their time for being more alone and recharging. The case we had today is sort of a mix. Like she's home a lot, but she would like to be with more people. So it can be a little tricky to tell, is my child playing Roblox or video games because they want to be alone, or because there isn't something social for them to do, and this is like the next best thing for them to do. Okay, next slide. All right, so one of the things, the best things to keep in mind when you're thinking about helping your child is there are some things that every child should learn, and some things that children really should be able to have their input respected, right? So manners is something that all children should learn, and you should have no hesitation teaching your autistic children manners, just the same way you would teach your children that don't have autism. And then it's also important to recognize that when you're in specific roles in relationships, there are skills you need in that role. So there are skills on how to be a good member of a group project, right? Or a good teammate if you're on a sport team or other team, or a good colleague at work, or what are the skills you need in a teacher-student relationship. You know how to ask for help, you know how to turn things in, you know how to be respectful to each other, you know how to advocate in a teacher-student role. So there are skills for different roles. But then there's a wide range of relationships that are optional. And sometimes as family members, we really want a particular kind of thing for our child, but we need to just be really careful that we're letting the child lead in what they want. So if you have a child who's really satisfied with the social interaction at school and comes home and is energized and has had a good day and really enjoys the company of other kids at school, but is not clamoring for after school activities, respect that and say, okay, well, school seems to be going really well. Maybe this is a child who does better in scheduled activities rather than, unstructured kind of hanging out after school activities. So take their lead. Don't assume that what worked for you is going to be perfect for them, and don't assume that there's one way to do this. there's lots of ways for all of us to have good social relationships. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to outline some of the, just thinking about you all as mostly family members, and maybe waiting for some kind of intervention or something to start, because this is called While You Wait. I wanted to highlight some of the opportunities that you may be trying to figure out, or maybe you haven't thought of yet, and could be something that you could add to your loved one's schedule. So there's 4 different things that I thought of, and there may be others people can put in the chat. One is a social skills group, which is where you're actually focused on direct teaching. So there's a curriculum, there's coaching, there's activities that the group does. It's a clinical kind of experience. It may be at school. It might be led by a speech and language therapist. It might be led by a guidance counselor. It might be in a clinic setting where it's happening after school. It might be in your early intervention where you've got like a play group of little kids that are all learning how to interact with each other. So, but there's usually a curriculum, and it's about direct teaching of skills. Another thing is an interest group, and that would be like where you would have a group of people who all love doing Lego or Roblox or Minecraft or other activities, and they get together because they're coming together around that interest. Now, some of those, so that's an excellent opportunity. It's not a social skills training group, unless it is using the activity as a therapeutic tool, which sometimes there are some therapy groups that use role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, and they are specifically working on social skills using the game. But sometimes it's just an interest group, an opportunity to get people who like the same thing together. This is something that you can do your whole life. There are adult interest groups. There's hiking clubs, there's swimming clubs, there's game clubs, all that kind of stuff. So this isn't, as an interest group, it's something you can do forever. A third thing is individual coaching. So if you have an ABA therapist and you want some social coaching for your child, or your child wants some social coaching, then you can have the ABA therapist, you can ask them to go where your child is and kind of coach them through difficult situations, like maybe the playground or the park. How do they go up to a kid they want to play with? How do they navigate trying to enter a game or invite another child to play with them? And it can just be one-on-one right in the moment. And then the fourth one I thought of is scheduled opportunities. So thinking of things that that are in the kid's schedule. It's not, they don't have to call somebody and arrange it. It's not I'll text you and then we'll see how to get our parents together so we can go over to each other's houses. It's something that's already scheduled. So it might be soccer lessons or swim lessons or play dates that parents organize. It could be specific outings. I think volunteering can be a great way to have a nice social interaction and feel good, because you feel good when you're helping other people, and that leads to good endorphins and just as a nice experience. And then another one I wanted to add, in case people don't know about it, is there are sometimes places in the community that have regular opportunities. So the Please Touch Museum, for example, has a regular Sunday, I think it's the third Sunday from 9 to 11. They kind of dim the lights. It's very sensory friendly. It's called Play Without Boundaries. And there's usually about 100 families there with autistic children. And it's a nice place to both enjoy the museum, have some interaction, and it can be just a scheduled thing. Okay, next slide. Oh, and Monica's got a good comment about using the ABA therapist. That's great. Okay. I also wanted to outline some of the supports that you as a parent could provide to your child. So one is social stories, which a lot of people who come to this know what social stories are, but if you don't, put that in the chat and we'll get you some resources. But sometimes writing a social story about a specific role or task or activity can be really helpful. And one idea is to write, like, let's say your child is going to be part of a group project or part of a play at school or part of a soccer team or something. You could outline, like, what's this going to be? What's this experience going to be like? And what's my job, or what are my roles in this group? And maybe it's something that everybody in the group would want to read, so everybody kind of has an introduction to what to expect. So social stories can be helpful. Pre-teaching is a strategy a lot of parents also benefit or find helpful. And the idea there is, let's take soccer, for example. If you think soccer would be fun for your child and you want them to be on a team, the first time you go to soccer practice, there's a lot happening. The coach is trying to get you to figure things out. You don't know the kids yet. You see the grass, you're finding the dandelions. Like there's just a lot to pay attention to. So some families will do what's called pre-teaching, where before soccer starts with the team. You go out and you're practicing, like kicking the ball. Maybe you're teaching the child some of the rules of soccer, like what's the goal, where's the goal, and how you run, what direction you go to get to the goal. And you pre-teach some of the content that you, as much as you can, even as a parent, you know a lot about soccer, even if you didn't play it as a child. But you pre-teach what you can so that when the child goes to soccer with the team, they have just that much extra knowledge and information. So there's just a little bit less that's brand new. And it can give them a little more opportunity to really focus on the other stuff, like the other kids and following the directions of the coach and that kind of thing. So pre-teaching can happen in any kind of situation. And sometimes we might not think about it. So I'm hoping this would help people be more conscious about, if I want my child to be part of some activity, is there some part of that I can give them a little advanced tutorial on, so they're a little bit more ready. And then pre-visiting a place is also a way to kind of make one thing less familiar. So let's imagine that your child's gonna join a Lego group, and maybe the first day is going to be really overwhelming because everything's new. So maybe you can go to the facility ahead of time, see where it is, see what's nearby, kind of see what it looks like on the inside, and then that just makes that first day a little bit less brand new. Okay, next slide. I like the comment about sometimes our kids do want to join the group. They just don't know exactly how to do that. So thank you for that. Okay, and then I wanted to introduce or reinforce the idea of social anchoring activities. So social anchoring is when institutions have things that just bring people together. So examples are like church and sporting events and community events. They're just things that when you live in a community, it's these institutions that create these social opportunities that are very regular, they're scheduled, you know when they're coming, and it brings people together who might not interact with each other without them, right? So if you think about the people in your school, you might not meet them if you weren't going to school with them. Same with community events and church. It just brings people together. Your family can make one of these, and you can invite other people. So, and I have heard this suggestion from a variety of families. It's not only good for the kids, but it's also like good for the parents because it's less. You don't have to schedule every single thing. You kind of have this institution that happens. Kate's bringing a good name for it. It's called a third place. So we all spend our day at school or at work, and then we go home. But the third place is where you get to meet people that you don't meet at school or home. And if you think about, like, European cities often have these big plazas in the middle of town, and that's where everyone hangs out. So you go to school or work during the day, then you come home and have dinner, and then you go to the plaza. The kids are playing, the adults are having a drink or a coffee. You get to meet other people that you just wouldn't interact with, and it's really, really a lovely, an important part of being in a community. So it's called a third place. And so that's like a different concept where it's another place, but a social anchoring activity can kind of accomplish some of those same things. So, for example, you might have, like, let's say your kids like to swim, so maybe you and your family decide that every Thursday night you're going to go to the YMCA and swim. You'll end up meeting the regulars who are also there on Thursday. And maybe if there's another friend family, you can say, hey, we always go Thursday night. If you are up for going, we'd love to have you go. And there's some other ideas, examples, but it's a way to sort of, then you don't have to plan it. And you may find that there's a few families who come and it's a different mix every time. I've heard this as a strategy for adults too, in making new friends, where they might, like, maybe two friends get together and say, okay, we're gonna start a social anchoring activity, and maybe it's happy hour at a particular, every Thursday night or every Friday night we do happy hour from 5 to 7 at the same bar every time, or the same restaurant, and we have appetizers or something. And so they go every Friday night to that restaurant for appetizers, and then if they meet somebody who they think might be a good friend possibility, then they say, hey, we always go to X restaurant for appetizers on Friday. Would you ever be interested in that? And if they say yeah, then you can say, sure, great, give me your text, give me your cell phone number, and I'll let you know when we're going next. And then the day before, the next Friday, you text that person and say, hey, we're going for appetizers tomorrow. We'd be happy to see you if you're available. And then if they come, great. If they don't come, fine. But if you do that with several people, you probably end up with a little group that always comes for appetizers on Friday. And it's just a really nice way to make friends without too much trouble. Okay, next slide. All right. There are a ton of resources about how to make friends, and there's books for all different ages. There's YouTube videos galore on this. So there really is lots of content all over TikTok, all over everything, and which is great, because then you can really find something that speaks directly to you, your child, or your situation. So I thought about, instead of giving some recommendations, I thought I would give you some guidance about what to watch together and what to clarify. As I kind of go through when I see content online or books, these are kind of the things that stand out to me. Is that there's lots of good things. Some of the tips are just not age appropriate. So if your child is pretty concrete or literal, and they're listening to content, it might be talking about things that are designed for younger kids than them, or for older adults than them. So maybe helping them calibrate it, or adapt it to their age would be important. The other thing is to help clarify the difference between a social rule and a social suggestion. I think we talk a lot about social norms and social rules as if there's always this one way that is the correct way. And even some of our best social information or social skills sometimes have to wiggle or have to be adapted. So I really think it's important to, when you see content, I often will see things like, you should always make eye contact, or you should always chat people up, or you should, always make sure that you're meeting lots and lots of people. And those kind of words like always and never just can make it seem very overwhelming. Like, it's not the case that you should always do something all the time. So helping your loved one kind of recognize what's a rule and what's a suggestion. And then there's a lot of content out there that has a lot of metaphors in there that your child may not understand. So one I saw recently was about, the idea of you have to meet a lot of people in order to find a potential friend, and you might get some rejection along the way. And so it's important to develop a thick skin. Well, if your child is not great at metaphors, they might not know what that means, and that could really be confusing to them. So help them find those and work around them. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then a strategy that I have used with families that I think you could do at home is you kind of map out relationships. So here's just a very small snapshot of, like, the way I usually approach it is I will have each column in this spreadsheet describe a different kind of relationship. So it might be, these are just 4, but as I mentioned earlier, there's a bazillion different kinds of relationships. And it depends on what age your child is and how much they want to dive into a particular relationship. But here's just some examples. And then the row is the things that you do in that relationship. So what kind of things do you talk about with that person? What kind of activities do you do? Where do you go? What kind of maybe personal information do you share with them? Like thinking about the case today, and a lot of kids these days, or adults these days, you might have rows for like, what do you do when you have an Instagram follower? Because you have a relationship with that Instagram follower. If you're posting and you're getting messages, that's a relationship. So what do you do with that? Or what do you do if you have a troll, an internet troll bothering you? So there's all kinds of relationships that I didn't include. And for me, especially for teenagers, I also have used this to talk about boundaries with intimacy and what kind of affection do you show in different relationships. As teenagers get older, they often have pretty limited information about intimate relationships, and this could be a whole topic that we talk about. And so if they're getting most of their information from like movies, you see somebody go from being a stranger to in a committed relationship in the span of like 30 to 45 minutes. So you might not realize that there's, lots of time that's actually happening in between those scenes. I have had some kids just really not understand that the affection that you get from somebody from a committed relationship is very different than what you might get from a classmate. And a spreadsheet like this helps kind of teach all those boundaries. You can add whatever rows you want, whatever columns you want, and you talk about it together and you realize together like, oh, this is complicated. I had one client who really wanted a girlfriend. And so we talked about what does that mean to be a girlfriend? And we said, like, okay, it's somebody you see outside of school. You see them at least once a week. You have had some conversation about the fact that you like each other. And everything that we put together as the definition of a girlfriend matched one of the members of a social skills group that they were both part of. So he was like, well, she's meeting all the criteria for being my girlfriend. And I was like, yes, that's true. There's something different though, because if the only place you see your girlfriend is at the scheduled activity and you're not contacting each other outside of that, then maybe that's not quite the same as what most people would consider a girlfriend. Anyway, it's a great place to start the conversation about different kinds of relationships. Next slide, and you'll see how complicated it gets as you dig into them. All right, are there any questions? We've got time for questions or scenarios. Oh, you know what I didn't talk about? I made this. What we didn't talk about in this presentation is things like negative relationships. So everything that I mentioned was really about trying to foster positive relationships. There's a whole other topic about how do you deal with relationships? How do you deal with relationships that might be unhealthy, or identifying those situations? How do you deal with getting excluded, or when you have a conflict with somebody that's important to you? How do you deal with getting bullied or interacting with bullies, or like internet trolls or other kinds of things? So we didn't talk about that today. If that's something people would like to talk about, let us know and we can talk about that in a future session.